Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody.
Hillary Clinton wants to abolish it, believe me. She wants to abolish our Second Amendment.
I think they didn't deny it. I don't think anybody denied it.
Other presidents did not call. They'd write letters, and some presidents didn't do anything.
Many people have come out and said I'm right.
You really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop?
Hello and welcome to Fallacious Trump, the podcast where we use the insane ramblings of a soggy firework wrapped in old hot dog skins to explain logical fallacies. I'm your host, Jim.
And I'm your other host, Mark. A logical fallacy is an error in reasoning that results in bad or invalid arguments. And the logical fallacy we're looking at this week is the appeal to self-evident truth. That description, before we go on, that description of the soggy firework wrapped in hot dog skins, that is brilliant. It reminds me of, I saw somebody had posted it somewhere, that Boris Johnson was all the last scrapings from the floor of a Wetherspoons shoved into a sausage skin and taught to make noises with its face. Yeah, so that, yeah, there we go. They are very similar. Yeah, old hot dog skins. Ooh. Yeah.
So, self-evident truth. This is episode 104th, and it's just been the 4th of July, and there's some self-evident truths that get talked about a bit around then, so this seemed like the obvious choice to do it.
Good. Well, yeah, completely obvious. This week. It was, clearly.
Self-evidently the best time to do this one. And there are truths that some people hold to be self-evident, and that doesn't necessarily make them true.
Right. Yes, what it does mean, it gives them the handy get out of not having to provide any evidence or argument or explanation or defend their position, because it's just self-evident, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a self-evident thing. Yeah, I see you're avoiding using the word truth. Because that,
Yeah, so our first example from Trump comes from when he was talking about election observers.
In Pennsylvania, Democrats have gone to the state Supreme Court to try and ban our election observers, and very strongly. Now, we won the case, but they're going forward. They don't want anybody in there. They don't want anybody watching them as they count the ballots. And I can't imagine why. There's absolutely no legitimate reason why they would not want to have people watching this process, because if it's straight, they should be proud of it. Instead, they're trying, obviously, to commit fraud.
Yeah. Wow. Bit of a leap, isn't it? Yeah. He's the only person in the world, obviously, that uses strongly in that.
Yeah, that's a weird use of strongly, isn't it? They want to ban them, and very strongly.
And very strongly. I mean, is it possible to have a non-weird use of strongly? Is it even
if you're lifting, if it's about physical strength, then
you do
I
things
think you could use strongly.
We say it.
It's still clunky and weird.
Yeah. How are you lifting those weights? Strongly? Yeah.
No, it's not great.
No.
I mean, all of this is complete nonsense.
Yeah.
If it was true.
Yeah.
The fact that he's just saying it, they're obviously committing fraud. Doesn't make that true, and he isn't at this point or at any point over the last year or so providing any proof of it at all.
Well, that's because he's hit upon the fact that it's just obvious, just plain for all those to see, including the person that said, well, they got a whole bunch of votes out of a plastic bag and put it in what it looked like.
Suitcase. From under the desk.
Yeah. So it's obvious. It's so blindingly obvious to our completely Republican mind that we haven't got to provide any proof. How can you not see that? That's kind of what the exaltation is, isn't it? Are you stupid or something that you just can't see this?
Yeah, no, it's obviously fraud.
Obviously fraud. That's the only reason they wouldn't want to let them in. They're not.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, apart from the fact that they absolutely let them in, he claimed in this section that Democrats in Pennsylvania went to court to ban Republican observers from watching them count ballots.
Yeah.
It's like that Luke Skywalker meme. Every word of that is not true. It's like every part of what you just said.
It's practically untrue, isn't it?
It wasn't the Democrats who even went to court in the first place about it.
Yeah.
It was that the Republican poll watchers, or the people who were kind of riling them up, wanted them to be able to stand like over the shoulder of the people who were counting. Yeah. And it was during COVID. Exactly. I mean, it's still during COVID, but it was even more during COVID. Yeah. And so they had
more strongly during COVID.
Sensible distancing guidelines that said they had to be at least 6 feet away from the people. And so one idiot took out binoculars and was like making out like it was impossible to see from 6 feet away because he was Mr. Magoo.
Binoculars,
and so they went, oh well, this is a thing that we have to take to court. So the Republicans took it to court. They said we want to be able to stand right next to them and sneeze at them. Yeah. And the Democrats said no, it's a perfectly fine place to stand. You're all allowed in the room. You can all watch it all. You just have to be not breathing at us. And the court said, that's completely fair. And so Trump for President Inc. appealed. Yeah. And the appeals court went, no, they should be able to stand wherever they like, basically. But at no point was anyone trying to ban anyone from the room or not have people watching the counting or anything like that. And all of what he said is bullshit. And even if it wasn't, it would still not have led to the conclusion he drew from it.
Yeah. And at no point did it not require evidence to back up his claim. Which he thinks is just obvious. The obvious non-causal connection between all of this and fraud, and nobody held him to account for that. There's nobody in that thing. Well, basically, because he at that point he just gets up and leaves and says thank you very much. What it takes is an Australian journalist to say, "What are you talking about? You can't do that with the charts. What are you talking about?" Yeah.
Well, in our next clip, there was a translator sitting behind Trump who did that very much with her face while he was talking.
Yes, I remember her. Yes.
This is about his first impeachment. All the time he was talking, she was kind of taking notes because she obviously needed to then do the other language, but was like looking at him like, what the fuck are you talking about, you madman?
Yes, for like sensible Europeans do. Yes.
She's created a phony witch hunt, another one. First one failed. They're all failing. This one is just absolutely crazy. All you have to do is read the transcript of the call. Read the transcript. This is a open and shut, simple case. They're desperate because they know they're going to lose the election.
Yeah, it is a open and shut case.
Yeah.
So
nothing to discuss.
The transcript is essentially self-evidently perfect.
Yeah. Oh, is that one that was the perfect call?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's saying read the transcript. It's an open and shut case, and there is arguably such a thing as an open and shut case where there is a great deal of evidence, and that's the thing about open and shut cases is they typically involve quite a lot of evidence, because that's how you know that it's going to be an easy case to win. The ones that don't have any evidence tend to be the ones that aren't quite so open and shut.
Yeah, and the thing that you open the case for is it's a metaphor for an actual case, a briefcase, a case with briefs in it, and we're not talking shorts. We're talking, lawyers' briefs, which contain the evidence. You open the case, you show the evidence, and that's all you need to do.
And then you say, case closed.
Case closed.
As you close your briefcase.
Shut the case, off you go. And they go, yep, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Are you sure that's where that's from? I don't know. I mean, it sounds plausible.
It ought to be.
It seems obvious.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's self-evidently true. Yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
You've convinced
But of course,
me.
if they're doing it in capital letters, they use the uppercase and not the lowercase. Yeah. No, that does actually come from cases full of letters.
Yes.
So I've just assumed that that's the case. Yeah. And and I need to offer no more evidence than that. Yeah.
Yeah. Case closed.
And now is the time, I think, for Mark's British politics corner.
Well, it's been an exciting week, and we'll get on to that later on. And but so what it's allowed me to do is to look at the various runners and riders in what's going on. So over the last month, is it? There was a vote of no confidence in Boris Johnson that was launched by his own party, or triggered by that as a result of people sending in letters to the chairman of the 1922 committee, which kind of looks after all of the backbenchers, so not just the cabinet ministers, but absolutely everybody that's working as part of the government, and that's the kind of the union, and that's the chairman received some 24 letters by the 1st of June 2022 that we knew about. And Nadine Dorries took to the airwaves. She's the Minister for Culture, Media and Sport, about which, needless to say, she knows nothing. And she looks at Boris like Tina Weymouth, the bass player from Talking Heads, used to look at David Byrne. And to look at both of them from now on. And when she was asked on BBC Radio 4's World at One on June the 1st about these 24 letters of no confidence having been sent in, she assures us that actually there's a coordinated campaign to oust her true love, her Prime Minister. And this is what she says.
There is, obviously, I think probably led by one or two individuals, a campaign behind the scenes to attempt to remove the Prime Minister for individual reasons to do with personal ambition and other reasons.
Who's leading it?
You know, yeah. Well, I have no idea, but you know, there is obviously a coordinated campaign.
So obviously, there's a coordinated campaign to get Boris out, and it's been.
I mean, did all these letters arrive all at once?
No, in a very uncoordinated way, and they came from the backbenchers, so from all over the place. So, but they're coordinated, and you know, not unreasonably. Can't remember who's doing World at One. He says, "So who's leading this?" Well, I have no idea, but it's obvious. You know,
I don't know any of the details.
I don't know any of that, but it's obviously a conspiracy.
Her argument that it was for personal reasons of ambition and other reasons. That other reasons is doing a lot of work.
It is, exactly, yeah. Where's your proof of that? Well, no, because it's obvious. Don't use
the other reasons just can mean literally. I mean, that's almost the definition of not coordinated.
Yeah.
Is that there are multiple reasons why people might have done these letters.
Exactly.
That I can only collect together under a heading called other.
Other, yeah. Other
miscellaneous reasons.
Miscellaneous other, yeah. That kind of, yes, we've just lumped all of those together in a coordinated way. Yeah, we're going to colour them all the same colour, green for other, yeah. And then she has another interview on the day of the confidence vote itself, which was I can't remember when that was now. It's all a blur. And what she does is, in her conspiracy theory, in her coordinated conspiracy, she scoops up Remainers. There were Remainers in the party, you know, people who voted not to leave the EU. And also reminds those errant naysayers that the party donors don't like a divided party and they will stop giving if Boris goes, which I think speaks for itself. So there you go, lol. So the second example is from today, actually today, Thursday the 7th of July, when we're recording this. Kier Starmer spoke today about Boris remaining as Prime Minister after having resigned as leader of the Tory party as a result of 59 plus of his uncoordinated government resigning. unless he goes. So they all so there was this vote of no confidence. Was it a month ago? Some weeks ago. He won, or he didn't. We talked about that before. He didn't lose sufficiently to.
He lost it worse than Theresa May.
He lost it worse
so
than
bad
Theresa May,
that
who
he
went,
had to leave.
Yeah, when that was pointed out by Rees-Mogg, and this time round, Rees-Mogg kind of went, "That's fine. He's fine," And Nadine Dorries had actually said he only needs to win by one. And you go, really? Okay, so if you've got really one? No. So anyway, today, Kier Starmer, in response to the fact that 59 members of the government resigned in a peculiarly uncoordinated fashion, so well, apart from one bunch of MPs, 5 of them signed the same resignation letter, I guess, to save paper or to just get the same retweets. I don't know. Everyone seemed to be resigning over Twitter. So, yeah, and some of them during Prime Minister's questions, and so it wasn't a coordinated thing, and yet, so Boris eventually kind of went, all right, I'll resign as leader of the party, but he said he was going to stay on as the Prime Minister. So, as the leader of the party you are the First Minister, so because you are the head of all the ministers, you're the leader, so therefore, if you resign as leader, you ought to go as Prime Minister. Didn't worry Cameron or Theresa May or even Blair. They just kind of, when they lost their leadership thing or they lost their election, they just went, right, well, I'll go and that's it, I'm off. But not Boris, no. So Starmer today said this.
It's obvious he's unfit to be Prime Minister. That's been blindingly obvious for a very, very long time. And if they don't get rid of him, then Labour will step up in the national interest and bring a vote of no confidence, because we can't go on with this Prime Minister clinging on for months and months to come.
So he says it's obvious that he's unfit to be Prime Minister. It's been bleeding obvious for ages. And although he's not offering any evidence for that, he's kind of doing the fallacy.
I mean, just gestures round wildly at everything.
Yeah. Obviously, all you need to just turn the camera the other way, not point it at Starmer. Yeah,
point it at Britain in general.
Or the There you go. Duh. Yeah. He should have done that, really, shouldn't he? He should have just gone, duh. That would have been, and his ratings would have gone up. Yeah, so hopefully they do follow up on that. I mean, what have they got to lose? Because what will happen is if Starmer does call a cop, so basically the party itself can have a vote of no confidence in its leader, which is what happened to Theresa May. It's happened to Boris. It also happened to Jeremy Corbyn twice. But then the opposition can trigger a vote of no confidence in the government itself. So that they will need to have the support of they could be voted down by the sitting government. So at the moment, when there are 59 missing members of the government, it's going to be easier to win
that vote,
because he's only got an 83. He had an 83 seat majority. He's now got 59 less than that, and so now would be the time to trigger it. I mean, what do you got to lose? Basically, if he will still win the moral victory, because then it would be clear that the Tories are only voting for a confidence in their own government under a leader who won't quit the building despite having resigned. So, yeah, it's just amazing. They're going to have to drag him out with his fingernails will be clinging to the door. There'll be scratch marks down the thing. Even Larry the cat, who lives in number 10, is apologising to the world on Twitter. He's got his own Twitter feed, and he apologises to the world and said, "Yeah, sorry about this, dear world. Sorry about all this. I'm going to have a word, and it'll all be back to normal, and we'll just get back to drinking tea and being nice to each other."
Yeah, I did see that Larry had felt the need to clarify that he is the Downing Street cat. He's not Boris Johnson's cat.
So he won't be going
distance himself from the Prime Minister.
Right. The third example was also today, buoyed up by the change that's coming. Charlotte Carew-Pole from Women to Win, which is a conservative organisation, as will become self-evident from her accent, by the way, said on BBC Radio 4's Women's Hour today that we need to get more women in politics, and now's the chance, because there's an implied self-evident truth, I think, here, that women are not involved in the scandals, they won't let their party down, and they won't embarrass their constituents. And she goes on to say this.
It is a good thing that change is coming, and let's grasp this opportunity. Let's encourage more women to come forward. Let's make the place a less toxic environment. There are not enough women, the whole of the Conservative Party. Let's make it a friendlier place for women. And let's encourage more consensus politics. The fact is that women tend not to be involved in sleaze. We roll up our sleeves. We get on with the job. We are good, reliable, stable. And, we are more balanced and conciliatory, and we take advice, and we are good politicians. When women tend to be more risk averse, and therefore that would lend to a better type of politician.
There's so much I could unpick there in debate. We tend to be, I mean, Theresa May just didn't deliver, but you know.
What I really like about that is she sounds exactly like you, Jim, there, going, there's so much wrong with what you just said. Yeah.
She holds herself back from going, okay, first of all.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Hang on a minute. But you're assuming that. So that's Emma Barnett, the presenter at the end, somewhat taken aback by the presumption of Charlotte there. And she only manages, I think, in her aghastness to invoke Theresa May. Well, what about Margaret Thatcher, famously not collegiate? We heard Geoffrey Howe's resignation speech only a couple of episodes ago. Priti Patel, the very definition of toxic politics. Nadine Dorries, Liz Truss. Okay, they might take advice, but only because they don't know anything. And are they good politicians? Any amount of UKIPers. And just because they're women, it isn't obvious that they'll be better or even good, as Charlotte maintains. So I think although she doesn't say it's obvious, it doesn't need saying, needless to say, it's self-evident. That's the implication, that just putting women in politics will make the place less toxic. She glosses over that in the Tory party, there is Nadine Dorries and Priti Patel, who are toxic arseholes. Doesn't matter.
It's very, very bold of you to take such a staunchly anti-woman stance there.
Yeah, well, they're self-evidently arseholes.
You're everywhere and nowhere, Boris. And we don't fucking care. Standing by a boarded up doorway with your stupid hair. Stupid! You think you'll go down in history, but you're going nowhere. Pointing out the wild fantasies when there's nothing there. And it's high hole, silver lining, and away you go now, Boris. Trot on! Don't know think that's worthwhile, except to make a fuss. That much is obvious.
Jeff Beck there with Hi Ho Silver Lining, with the word "though it's obvious" in it. That was the first, correct. Well, there's the song, obviously.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
obviously. Yeah.
Self-evidently there.
Speaks for itself. So, in the Fallacy in the Wild, we like to talk about the Fallacy of the Week from a non-political perspective, and our first example this week comes from Peep Show. This is a very short clip. This is a New Year's episode.
Jeremy, all rational people agree it's a truth self-evident that it's impossible to have a good time on New Year's Eve. The pressure's too immense.
Yeah.
Yep. That's it.
Yeah.
Clearly it. Yep. Yep.
There you go. No need to offer any evidence to back that up, because everyone knows.
Everyone knows
it is a self-evident truth.
Yeah.
It made me think of the is a truth universally acknowledged.
Right, yes, Pride and Prejudice, yeah.
But that's not quite the same thing, because that's more of everyone knows the alleged certainty. I'm having heard that and thought of that quote. I was then thinking, I wish I'd remembered.
Yeah.
When we were doing alleged certainty.
To put that in.
It is a truth universally acknowledged.
There you go.
So
yeah, let's just go back and edit that in. That'll be fine. Yeah. Well, I think it was probably obvious to everyone who listened to that one that it was, it was there. Yeah, and the problem is it is a truth held to be self-evident by those people who are miserable fuckers that don't like New Year. Yeah, and that's that which is exactly the character that David Mitchell is playing. And you're going to go, well, yeah, you're right. That and actually, when I heard that, and I thought, oh yeah, that's exactly true of those people. Yeah, and I'm not one of them. And the trouble is, I know several people like that who don't want to do anything in New Year. I go, come on, let's go do something in New Year. They're going, no, it'd be fucking miserable. Yeah, you're right. It will be fucking miserable if you.
I mean,
come.
you are more of a Jeremy. That's fair.
There you go. Yeah.
So our second example comes from the Blacklist, the surprisingly long-running, although quite entertaining, drama with James Spader.
Right.
It's fine. It's enjoyable, but it's been going like 12 years or something.
Not The Wire, is it?
So
no.
It's but anyway, it's perfectly good. This is from season 1, and this is when a case comes up where they discover that their boss, Agent Cooper, was involved in a potentially dodgy confession.
We need to take it seriously.
No, we don't. The federal prosecutor on the case is Tom Connolly. His reputation speaks for itself, so should mine.
So Cooper claims the prosecutor's reputation speaks for itself, so should mine. He's not offering evidence about this case. It's kind of an argument from authority. He's basically saying, this guy, you should trust him, just based on the kind of on the fact it's him.
Yeah.
And trust me based on the fact it's me.
And that's it.
To some extent, he's relying on the kind of relationship that has been built up over the now, 15 episodes or something, that yes, his employee should trust him based on the integrity he's shown to this point. But essentially, especially in invoking someone else and saying his reputation should speak for itself, he's doing this. He's claiming it is self-evident without needing to provide any further proof.
Yeah. And it's very resonant and redolent of what Boris does. One of the things I was looking for was there was a letter written in a Scottish newspaper which said that Boris's successes speak for themselves. So, and I was thinking, well, that's exactly what I want to find. But it had been deleted from the newspaper. Somebody had commented on it. Somebody was writing an article based on how is it that people think these things are true, sufficient to be able to say it's self-evident what they've done. You just need to base it on his reputation for being successful. And what he was looking at was, well, where's the evidence for that? Where's the proof?
Yeah, it is a kind of way of shouting down someone who is asking for evidence of something.
Yeah.
Prove this to me. Show me that what you're saying is true.
Yeah.
And when someone is self-evident.
Yeah.
It's just,
it should be enough.
I don't even need to prove it to
exactly. It's so clear to me, and when you look at the way Nadine Dorries, if my advice to listeners is find someone that looks at you the way Nadine Dorries looks at Boris, it's that utter conviction that the person can do no wrong. They just can't, and they can't comprehend. So a bit like.
I mean, when you're as stupid as Nadine Dorries, though,
true.
There's a lot you can't comprehend.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Somebody did say that
it's a low bar.
That she'd submitted a letter of no comprehension. So, yeah. There you go.
So our final example in this section comes from Evil Under the Sun.
Oh, yeah.
It is Peter Ustinov's second outing as Hercule Poirot.
Is that the one that was in Egypt?
No, that's Death on the Nile.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
This
Clues
one,
in the title. Yeah.
They're in a fictional Mediterranean country.
Right.
The book, though, was based in Devon, I think. But
okay.
They thought, Devon's not
enough.
interesting.
Yeah.
Let's go on holiday and make this film. And it is fucking awful. It is. I mean, to be honest, I'm in the minority. The vast majority of reviews of the film say it's brilliant and wonderful and
self-evidently
fantastic.
Good. Yeah.
It's got a great cast. It's got James Mason, Maggie Smith, Diana Rigg, Peter Ustinov, obviously, Dennis Quilley, Jane Birkin. Fucking brilliant cast.
Yeah.
All overacting hideously. And the story and the plot and the which comes directly from Agatha Christie's novel. It's a reasonably faithful adaptation.
Yeah.
But the mystery is a piece of shit, and the reveal at the end is one of the worst in mystery literature. But it does provide us with this example.
Right.
And this is Poirot at the end of Poirot's summing up. This is the response he gets from the murderer.
Imaginatively conceived. Good, clear narrative style. I'll give you 9 out of 10, Poirot. I'm deducting 1 mark for total absence of proof. Is that true?
Do you mean to say we've sat here and listened to all that and you can't prove a word of it?
Unfortunately, Monsieur Redfern is absolutely right. I haven't a shred of evidence, although that is unquestionably what happened.
So it's unquestionable.
Unquestionable, yeah.
But he can't prove any of it.
No, got no evidence, but it is what happened. It's a bit like... So I think this is the... what somebody did at the BBC is watch this and went, oh, yeah, we can make a TV series like that. Let's base it in the Caribbean, and we'll call it Death in Paradise. And it's the nobody's... They kind of go, oh, yeah, we can have a police procedural with, people that we recognise in a nice location, bit of love interest on the part of the main character. But nobody's cottoned on to the fact that it's the best acting gig in the world because it's actually shot in the Caribbean. So you just get to spend a week in the Caribbean. It's utter shit. And they have these bits at the end. It's very Agatha Christie-esque in its construction, and you get these summing ups, and you go, oh no, and there's a certain police procedural fan of my acquaintance who absolutely can't get enough of it. I go, oh bloody hell, not that thing again.
I mean, the thing about Agatha Christie, and also true of a lot of the adaptations that kind of took Christie's work and ran with it and kind of just based things on the characters, is that sometimes she does the kind of mystery that the reader can work out as they're going along, or even if they don't work out, when the reveal comes, look back and go, oh yeah, I should have seen that bit.
Yeah.
And sometimes she does ones where it's completely unfair and something you couldn't possibly have known. Turns out to be the crucial piece of information that Poirot figured out and didn't mention to anyone. And and it's just, oh, well, that was a total waste of my time then. This is one of those ones.
Right. Yeah. It's a kind of, isn't that a Deus Ex Machina kind of thing?
It can be, but
something sort of pops up that you get to see in a flashback. And it happens that Poirot is walking past the window at the time of the flashback. And you go, well, wait
so
a minute.
Fucking annoying and ridiculous. But anyway, it does give us this example of him saying it is not a shred of proof, but it is unquestionably how it happened.
Yeah. And then does he actually get to prove that?
Because... Well, he doesn't prove any of the stuff he said.
Right.
But through an absurd situation that happens within the next couple of minutes, he manages to prove who did it. Kind of. To the satisfaction of the characters, he proves who did it. Not
the viewer.
Not to the viewer.
or the constabulary.
Or the law. No, absolutely. Just to the point where, like in an old Perry Mason or a Matlock episode, someone on the stand would go, all right, I did it.
Exactly.
Because that's the quickest way to get to the end of the episode.
Yeah.
So we're gonna play fake news, folks. I love the game. It's a great game. I understand the game as well as anybody.
Yes, it's time for Fake News, the game where I read out 3 Trump quotes, 2 of which are real and 1 I made up, and Mark has to figure out which one is fake news.
Before we go any further, I just need to say the fact that this is entirely rigged. I've been pointing it out. It's a coordinated effort on the part of Jim to humiliate me, and you know it speaks for itself that I've been thwarted in my attempts to get this right. I should be on 100%, but it's not my fault because these are the breaks. Them's the breaks.
I think your score speaks for itself.
It does. It's a self-evident revelation of how rigged this entire process is. Frankly, it's obvious. It should be obvious to all. I shouldn't have to spell it out. Yeah.
Our examples this week come from the Faith and Freedom Coalition conference, as they did last time. God, did he rant and rave a lot.
Keeps on giving.
It was, I mean, ostensibly about faith, about, religion and stuff.
Oh, okay.
He talked for about an hour, and it was mostly just whining.
Right.
It was
right.
And in this
with an
section,
amen at the end. Or?
In this section, he was whining mostly about how he never gets the credit for how enormous his crowds are.
Oh, okay, right.
Which is something obviously he's been whining about and lying about since the very beginning.
Funny he doesn't get credit for them because they're not large, and so why would you want to take credit for that?
He keeps going. He keeps on it. And these are quite long clips because I just wanted to emphasise how much he went on and on about this stuff.
Okay.
Number 1, statement number 1. And as to what happened on January 6th, it was a simple protest. It got out of hand. And I will say one thing they don't talk about. They never show the size of the crowd. I believe it's the largest number of people I've ever spoken to. I'm not talking about the very small percentage of people that went down to the Capitol, many of whom did nothing wrong and they're paying a big price because of this horrible situation that's taking place. I'm talking about the crowd that I spoke before. And some people went down long before I spoke. But the crowd that I spoke before was, I believe, the largest crowd. And I've spoken in front of big crowds. This is a big crowd. I've spoken in front of very big crowds. That was the largest crowd of people that I've ever spoken before.
Is he saying it a lot in order to convince himself? Do you think?
I think so.
Or it's kind of it's sort of running it, but he's practicing it and rerunning it, and running it, so that it then goes from his short-term memory into his long-term memory, and then he can trot that out as something to moan about at another paid gig. Yeah.
So then he immediately contradicts himself and moves on to the speech he gave on the Mall outside the Lincoln Memorial on July 4th, 2019. He said, Dr. King gave a speech and it was great. The I Had a Dream speech. It was great. How good was that? But they showed the picture and it was massive, tremendous numbers of people. They said it was 1 million people. 1 million people. And then I gave my speech and they showed the same thing. It's hard to believe many, many decades later, but it's identical architecture, identical pools. You look at it, the Lincoln, everything was identical. But it was many years later I gave my speech. So here's, they said, 1 million people. Now, my pictures were exactly the same, but the people were slightly closer together. They were more compact, but exactly the same. But there were more people. They were tighter together if you look at it. Donald Trump has 25,000 people today.
He holds a grudge over decades, doesn't he? God damn. And I'm surprised he hasn't mentioned bloody Forrest Gump. That one, there's Forrest Gump there. And he gets up and you look down there, and it's the same thing, the same architecture. And they even doubled the amount of people. They just took a thing and then they pasted them in. Yeah. Okay.
So he continues.
Right.
His speech was a great speech. It was but I give good speeches. Maybe not quite as good. I don't want to say, but they don't want to talk about it. I could say, great things. And they turn the cameras off. And they never show the crowds. I'm watching with Melania and she asks me, she says, how many people were there? You can't tell. I never see the crowds on TV. And I have some huge crowds. And I say the great things. And MSDNC and fake news CNN, they cut away and talk about hurricanes or something. I've probably, if you watch the fake news, you've never even seen some of the rallies with the great people. A lot of you have probably been to one. Who's been to one of my rallies? Yeah, a lot of you. But even now, they're not going to report on any of this.
That's handy, isn't it? You kind of go, yeah. See, if you watch the television news where they show pictures of it, that's not as many because they don't show as many. It's if you could see the rallies that they don't show on television, yeah, boy, those are huge. Yeah, who's been to one of my rallies? Yeah, a lot of you. But even though I can't, six people that put their hands up and they go, yeah, well, that's no good, is it? I want 1 million. Why aren't there 1 million in this room? Wow. Right. So he's gone on and on.
These are real, I
yeah.
can remind you.
Yeah. I know. I was just listening into, somebody writing a really a nice fictional damning report of the kinds of things he said. Yeah, but you go, no, two of them are actually real. Okay. Many of them did nothing wrong and paid a big price. To me, sounds it's a long aside. Okay, the millions of identical architecture. Yeah, I don't know about that. Speech for great speech. Then he invokes Melania. You see, they contain 3 red flags each. There's 3 red flags, 1 in each. Okay, so big crowds back in front of it, large academy hall. It was a simple process, just got out. And okay, all right. Okay, I think number 1 is the one that you made up. Simple process.
Okay, so of the other 2,
yeah,
which are you more convinced by?
I think ridiculously number 2, the I had a dream speech.
So number 2,
million people. Yeah.
It's real.
Oh, what?
And Dr. King gave his speech, and it was great. The I had a dream speech, it was great. How good was that? But they showed the picture, and it was massive. Tremendous numbers of people. They said it was 1 million people, 1 million people. And then I gave my speech, and they showed the same thing. It's hard to believe, many, many decades later, but it's identical architecture, identical pools. You look at it, the Lincoln, everything was identical, but it was many years later. I gave my speech. So they said, 1 million people. Now, my pictures were exactly the same, but the people were slightly closer together. They were more compact, but exactly the same. But there were more people. They were tighter together, if you look at it. Donald Trump has 25,000 people today.
And that's just one of the ways he's better than Martin Luther.
Yeah. And it was the same.
That loser could only get 1 million people.
Yeah. Why? It's hard to believe that many, many decades later, but it's identical architecture. Why? I gave my speech and they showed the same thing. Well, that's because you're in the same place. It's hard to believe that the architecture is identical. But incidentally, only 250,000 people were at King's.
Yeah, 250,000. No one has ever said it was 1 million people at Martin Luther King's
Not even the organisers of the Million Man March. No.
Yeah, 250,000. So a quarter of what he said.
Yeah.
Also, I couldn't find anyone that had said that it was 25,000 people.
No.
Or anything like that. It was
10.
Generally people on the day, or were saying, most of the reports were saying that the National Park Service hadn't released an estimate.
Right.
I think it was Vox, said the numbers were in the high tens of thousands. So
more than
80, 90,000, something like that, maybe.
25.
And that was the lowest estimate I could find.
Right.
People were saying, hundreds of thousands or 100,000 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I saw one Newsweek article that was in response to him saying this last month,
right,
which claimed that a local WTOP reporter had said that there were no more people there than on a regular Saturday, which is not true, because I tracked that guy down. And he had been talking about the 4th of July 2020 during COVID lockdowns.
Right.
And so they were yes, it's July 4th on the mall. Yeah, there's going to be fireworks or something. And but it's the same number of people you'd expect to see here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he absolutely was not talking about that. Would have been an insane thing to say.
Such a regular Saturday. It's a very popular place. Yeah, people come down here every Saturday. They stand around,
just look at the Lincoln Memorial for hours,
wait for somebody who's made of old hot dog skins stuffed with dank squibs. Yeah,
yeah. So that was real.
Whoa.
You also thought that number 3 was real. And number 3.
Yeah.
It's fake news.
Oh man. Oh well, that's very. Yeah, you see the Melania red flag should have. But that's the kind of thing he would say.
I mean, that's how this works.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah. Oh, I see it now. I see it all now.
Finally got
where I've been going wrong.
Episodes.
Yeah. Oh, if it looks like something he would say, not necessarily something he would say.
Yeah,
oh!
It's obvious now, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So. Yes, that was not a thing. The one thing that was kind of based on reality or reality. I say reality. Something Trump said in that was the fact that he did kind of jokily try to compare the quality of his speech to the "I Have a Dream" speech.
Whoa.
Reminder: this was the speech in which he said that the Confederate Army had run the airports. And stuff like that.
Yeah,
that was the speech he was kind of trying to jokily claim, like running it a bit up the flagpole and seeing if they thought he was right or not. Was as good as the "I Have a Dream" speech.
Exactly. And you know, to be fair, if he had done it and it wasn't a figment of his imagination, they would have just gone, yes, you make speeches as good as that bloke, whatever his name was. Whatever happened to him? Yeah. He can't have been any good. Where is he now? Yes.
He never became president.
No.
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh my God! So
that means that number one.
Oh no!
Was a real thing that a grown man said.
And as to what happened on January 6th, it was a simple protest. It got out of hand. And I will say one thing they don't talk about. They never show the size of the crowd. I believe it was the largest number of people I've ever spoken to. I'm not talking about the very small percentage of people that went down to the Capitol, many of whom did nothing wrong. And they're paying a big price because of this horrible situation that's taking place. I'm talking about the crowd that I spoke before. And some people went down long before I spoke. But the crowd that I spoke before was, I believe, the largest crowd. And I've spoken in front of big crowds. This is a big crowd. I've spoken in front of very big crowds. That was the largest crowd of people that I've ever spoken before.
Wow.
You know, the thing people don't mention about the insurrection is the size of the crowd they had.
That I was talking to. Yeah. They kind of, nobody's gone, forget all that bit about, the threat to life and the people have died of heart attacks and strokes as a result of the stress inflicted upon them by the idiots storming the Capitol building. Forget all that. Yeah. Look how many people there are here. God, that's amazing that he can generate that kind of...
He claims the biggest crowd he's ever spoken in front of.
Yeah.
And then the next paragraph, he talks about an event he reckons there were more than 1 million people at.
Yeah. Well...
So, I mean, he's wrong on both counts. but even in his head, is it possible he thinks there were 1 million people at the mall on January 4th, and yet there were more than people that... in the ellipse outside the White House.
Yeah.
But what the fuck?
It was, I believe, it was the largest crowd. And I was spoken in front of big crowds. This is a big crowd. It is a big crowd. I was spoken in very big crowds. That was a larger crowd. So you just got to go. Wow, that's what kind of I thought that can't be true because there's too many ellipses in there. Just go round and round and round and round and round.
Estimate, by the way, for the crowd size on the day, about 10,000.
Oh, okay.
So less than 1% of the number of people he's claiming in the next paragraph he spoke in front of a couple of years ago. And again, this is a speech to a room full of evangelical Christians who have come to talk about, faith and how it interacts with politics over the course of a weekend. And he's reading talks the room, for like 10 minutes about how big the crowds are that he gets, and no one ever sees them, and you don't show them on TV. You don't get helicopter shots above Washington, he says at one point, of the crowds. It's just
what the hell? And it's that whole bit
a sad man.
When he kind of there's these little bouncing caveats. I'm not talking about the very small percentage of people that went down the Capitol, many of whom did nothing wrong, and they're paying a big price because of the horrible situation. I'm talking about the crowd that I've spoken in front of big crowds. This is a big crowd. I've spoken in front of big crowds.
Yeah.
And it's just inane drivel. And he's getting paid for this. He must be getting paid for this.
And multiple rounds of applause and cheers during this speech from the assembled Christians. So
/ Republicans.
Yeah. Which unfortunately means that you still have a bit of work to do to get up to 50% by our...
That's a self-evident truth.
Our 100th game.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. Oh, my God.
So,
I've got to get back up to 50 by then.
46 out of 94.
Eek! Right. That's, needless to say, I've got work to do.
And it's time for the part of the show that this week, at least, is called The Supreme Court is Still Not a Logical Fallacy. Kind of sadly. Because, I mean, really, we would have talked about all of this stuff last time, but last time we had to talk about the January 6th public hearings.
Yeah.
So now we get
kind
to
of
talk
cheery.
About...
That was sort of
cheery. Kinda. And so now we get to talk about the various ways in which the Supreme Court is ruining society as a whole.
Yeah.
And they've done this in ways that I think would really please Georgia gubernatorial candidate who ended up getting about 3.4% of the vote, Candice Taylor, who, as you'll remember, we talked about her slogan on her bus was Jesus, Guns, Babies. And those are all things that have been addressed by the Supreme Court in the last 2 weeks of their term.
Yeah.
If you just add, if you make it Jesus, Guns, Babies, Environment, Miranda Rights, then you're there.
Yeah.
Basically, that's all of the things that
Jesus,
they
Guns, Babies,
completely
Earth.
overturned.
Yeah. Jesus, Guns, Babies and Earth.
Incidentally, Candice Taylor, I think authorities should probably have a word with her.
Right.
Because the Georgia Guidestones were bombed today.
Oh,
yesterday, actually. Which she had made one of her kind of campaign promises was to destroy the Georgia Guidestones. She didn't get in, although I don't think she's conceded yet. She still claims that she was cheated out of the other 97% of the vote. But someone bombed the Georgia Guidestones. So for safety reasons, they had to demolish what was kind of left standing of them.
Wow.
And, so she has tried to throw God under the bus and claim that it was God. She said God is God all by himself. I don't know what that means. He can do anything he wants to do. That includes striking down satanic guidestones. She doesn't mention why he didn't do that for the first 30 years they were there.
Yeah.
So, But no, it wasn't her, it was God. So.
Wow.
But I don't know if that will stand up in court.
No.
But anyway, Jesus, Guns, Babies. The Supreme Court has done stuff about each of these things. And they have done stuff that is so anti-law.
Yeah. If who do you go to argue with the Supreme Court? That's who holds them accountable?
Supposedly, in name at least, Supreme.
Right.
And therefore... There is no higher appeal.
It's quite apt that it's this episode that we're talking about it because they hold these things to be self-evidently true. That one of them being that they know all that there is to know, that their edict is beyond reproach. It's beyond the need to question, because they are the Supreme Court, and therefore, their judgments are beyond reproach.
And also
they're flawless.
Any reasonable logic or sense.
I
mean, they've so destroyed any sense of the ability to rely on precedent or like other cases that the National Conference of Bar Examiners, the people who run the bar exam for people trying to be lawyers, put out a statement on the day that Roe was overturned saying examinees taking the NCBE developed July 2022 exams, bar exam, will not be required to be familiar with this term's US Supreme Court decisions.
Wow.
So essentially, do not answer the bar exam based on what's been happening recently.
Wow.
Because you'll get them wrong. You'll get the answers wrong. Because we wrote it based on actual law. So just ignore everything that's been happening.
Wow. So the implication is that actually they're not basing it at all on case law, precedent, or anything like that, but purely from political motivation.
I mean, they're making up all kinds of bullshit.
Right. Yeah.
It depends on
The whole abortion thing was like, it doesn't appear in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Therefore, Roe v. Wade can't have made a judgment on that because it's not a thing that's talked about.
I mean, that is not a law. I am pretty confident that the Supreme Court have ruled on a number of things that don't show up in the Constitution.
Yeah.
They made up a test, basically.
Yeah.
Alito made up a test in the Roe opinion, which didn't actually change dramatically from the draft opinion that was leaked last month.
So it didn't gain any more legal footing.
No. He didn't shore any of it up.
Right.
But he basically made the argument that because the right to an abortion isn't something that is rooted in the tradition of America, therefore, it doesn't exist.
So
therefore, it's not a right that you have.
So therefore, the law that they created because there hadn't been one. So they created one in 1973 to say you now have a right because it's not covered by the Constitution. So we're going to make an extra law to deal with that. He's saying because there wasn't a law in the Constitution prior to that, the one of you making a law to cover that omission doesn't count.
Essentially, it is exactly the opposite of the way it normally works.
Yeah.
In that you only really need to enshrine in law things which are not assumed already and generally based on tradition and the deeply rooted in the history of America to already be people's rights.
Yeah.
You don't need to make laws to protect the things that people all consider to be everyone's rights. You need to make laws to protect the things that some people disagree.
Yes.
You should have as a right. Some people want to take your right away. They have to make it a law so that those people don't get to do
that. Yes. So like
that's
the
how
law
that
about
works.
Not enslaving people.
Yeah. If you assume that in order to be a right, stuff has to have been part of the tradition when only white male landowners were allowed to vote.
Yeah.
Weirdly, a lot of those traditions favour white male landowners.
Yeah.
You find a lot of less of the things that are deeply rooted in the tradition of America that favour minorities.
Yeah.
It's weird that, isn't it?
Or women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the majority, which is women.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's seriously fucked up in all kinds of ways. But the dissents and the concurrences that came along with it were just added, really, to how fucked up it is. In as much as I think it was Brett Kavanaugh wrote one saying look, all of you who are talking about losing other rights because of this are just being hysterical and crazy, and like this is not going to lead to any other rights being taken away.
Yeah.
And Clarence Thomas wrote a dissent, a concurrence to Alito's opinion, essentially saying, oh, we are totally coming for your other rights. We are absolutely going to take those other rights away. Yeah. That is not something you even need to worry about.
Yeah.
We are on it. He said, in future cases, we should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence and Obergefell. Weirdly, he stopped short of mentioning Loving v. Virginia,
right?
Which is the interracial marriage law.
Yeah.
Odd that he would leave that out, but Griswold v. Connecticut is the right to contraception. So, for married couples to be able to buy contraception.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It boggles the mind why they think that is a thing that needs to be dealt with when they're worried about, abortions, especially before they've managed to outlaw abortions federally. So, which is another thing that they and other Republicans are talking about. Once they've done it, I suppose, then taking away contraception will increase the number of births and also, obviously, illegal abortions and people dying.
Yeah.
So there's that. Obergefell, obviously, is the same-sex marriage, so gay marriage. He wants to take that away. Unsurprising. Lawrence v. Texas, though, is a 2003 decision that struck down sodomy laws. So that's butt stuff, oral sex, basically anything except kind of traditional Christian missionary sex.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about the party of big government.
Yes, exactly. How are you going to police that?
Excessively?
Yes, you would have to. Yes, every single home might be a potential miscreant. Yeah.
I mean, they just don't want to have anyone to have any fun at all.
No,
is basically what they're trying to crack down on.
Yeah.
It's fucking insane, and they are absolutely doing that. He wasn't saying, theoretically, academically speaking, these things also kind of fall in the same. He was saying we should reconsider. He is sending a message to states to say, bring cases that challenge these rulings, and we will look at them, and we will overturn them. Yeah. And there's nothing in the reading of the opinion in Roe, Dobbs, that overturns Roe, that can't be applied to those cases. It doesn't argue in any substantively different way that would mean that if you are then looking at that as a precedent, which it is now, I guess, and looking at whether to uphold or overturn any of those three, you could make a reasonable argument that separates it from Dobbs.
Not about reasonable, but it would, there would be arguments that would appeal to the Supreme Court. They're going, they're not in the Constitution, they're not covered by.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yet they maintain that they're not politically motivated, It's it's plain that it ought to, but they are, because the rulings are reflective of the presidents that put them in power.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, some of the response to this week of shit from the Supreme Court has been Democrats. I'm tempted to use inverted commas around Democrats who are saying, but I think genuinely a lot of them are on the left saying, stop telling us to vote. Stop telling us to vote for Democrats. Clearly, we voted for Democrats. This is what we get. They're not doing anything.
Right.
As if with 48 senators and 2 independents, Biden has some kind of magic wand that he can wave to get rid of this thing that was put in place by McConnell and Trump over the course of years, over an extended effort to have exactly this thing happen.
McConnell's been at it for decades.
Yeah. absolutely people need to vote. People need to vote in numbers greater than ever before.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way that anything is going to change. And it needs to be a situation where there are more than 50 Democratic senators.
Yeah.
Or fucking, okay, independents as well. I don't care. People who are prepared to, A, overturn the filibuster, and B, stack the court.
Yeah.
Those are really the main thing, or at the very least, put in some kind of national law that in some way mitigates this, removes some of the worst elements of it, avoids the inevitable situation where if the Republicans control the House and the Senate, they will make this a federal abortions ban. Voting is the only way to stop that happening, and the only way to begin the process of reversing
and
this.
Part of the McConnell and Trump plan is to get people exacerbated with the opposition, with the Democrats. They get a bit exercised that the Democrats aren't doing anything, because what they've successfully done, McConnell and Trump, is hide the fact that they've done it. They kind of say, well, it's nothing to do with us. It's the fact that the Democrats didn't do enough. And that's the kind of the spin that's been put on this, rather than this is a massive, because we've been hoodwinked by Trump's short-termism, that all politicians have been working in a short-term way. But Mitch McConnell's been doing this for 30 years to get to this point. It's his life's work. So he's spent his life doing
absolutely.
it.
And another part of the backlash against it from the left has been people claiming that this is Obama's fault.
Yeah.
Because when he had a supermajority for like 3 weeks in 2009, he should have used that to codify Roe and make it a rule that couldn't be overturned. He never had the votes for that at no point, even when he had I think it was 59 votes in the Senate at one point, but even then, not all of those were pro-choice.
Yeah.
Now, not even all of them are, because there's still one guy, I think, is he a senator or a congressman? There's still one Democrat who is still very strongly, I'm not going to say pro-life, because it's not true. Pro taking choice away.
Yeah.
What we need is enough people that are genuinely pro-choice and can make have the power to vote in the way that will make a difference. And the only way to do that is to vote Democrats in and vote against Republicans.
Yep.
Even especially if you are a kind of occasional third-party voter, it really matters to vote strategically.
Yeah, and often people I talk to, well, both in Europe and America, say, well, we're kind of fed up with having to hold our nose and vote for the guys we wouldn't normally vote for. We want to vote for an independent or that kind of stuff. Even in the French presidential elections, they were saying it would be nice to be able to vote for the person that we want rather than the person we don't, in order that the person who definitely ought not to get in doesn't get in. But that's what we're going to have to do.
Yeah.
And you just have to do that and vote strategically. And in the UK, part of the problem is that the main opposition party, doesn't want to join it, because ultimately the politician, the UK opposition, want to get in power on their own terms, and yet the voter base are saying, well, which we saw in the last couple of by-elections that ultimately brought down Boris, the voter base are voting not for them, not for the opposition, and definitely not for the sitting government. So they're out of touch with the people. So sometimes you do have to hold your nose and vote for the people most able to bring about the change or block negative changes. Because there's the thing about the Supreme Court, it's not set in stone that there's 9 members.
Oh, absolutely not.
They could change the rules, and they could say, well, we'll have 12. and then we'll just chuck in 3 more Democrats. Or Democrats
There's 9 because at the time there were 9 districts.
Yeah.
Court districts. And now I think there's 13.
But they can make the rules up as much as they like.
Yeah.
Because they said, well, when...
It's not in the Constitution.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, it would be interesting for Biden to use an executive order to do away with the Supreme Court.
The existence of the Supreme Court is in the Constitution.
Right.
Just not the number of justices.
Yeah. Well, I guess the desperate anger at the Democrats saying you're not doing enough comes from the powerlessness in the face of this unelected right-wing Christian minority zealots who are, in effect, they're putting in place the equivalent of Sharia law. It's the kind of thing that they're accusing, Muslim communities of getting into power. Well, the representatives that come from Muslim backgrounds are saying, well, if we let them in, they will enact Sharia law. I think, well, we've got that's what's happening with the Supreme Court. They're enacting militant extremist Christian law.
Absolutely.
Yes. And
speaking of which, we've done the babies bit, the Jesus bit.
Yes.
Aside from the case where they decided it was against religious freedom not to give public money to private religious schools in Maine, the other case that was Jesus-based was Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, which was the praying football coach case,
right?
In which Neil Gorsuch just completely lied about what the case was about.
Wow. Yeah.
Which is bizarre, but enabled him to rule in a specific way, while kind of claiming not to be completely overturning the Establishment Clause.
Yeah.
Wow. Because he said that this was a case about this football coach who had lost his job, and it's being reported in the majority of places that this guy was fired for praying.
Right.
That isn't true. The school district did not renew his contract, and that happened after the fact that they repeatedly asked him to stop doing very demonstrative big public prayers after football games.
Right.
And he didn't stop doing it. And he then went on national TV to talk about how he was definitely doing it. And his lawyers told the school that he was going to keep doing it.
Okay. And they asked him not to as a term of employment, and he kept doing it.
And they didn't renew his contract. They didn't fire him.
Right.
His contract was over, and they went, do you know what? This guy's a bit of an arsehole.
Yeah.
We're not going to have him again
as is our prerogative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But apparently that's not okay. Because even though he is, this is a public school, he is a teacher in a public school, he's in a position of authority, he is publicly praying in a way that students felt compelled or kind of coerced, essentially, into joining in, and worried that
if they didn't, they'd be off the team.
This was kind of how it started. One parent complained after a number of these prayers following football games that his son felt compelled to participate despite being an atheist because the student feared he wouldn't get to play as much if he didn't participate.
Yeah.
Whether that's true or not, whether it was ever the coach's intention to favour players who believed the same stuff he did or participated in the prayer at the end of the football games or whatever, that doesn't matter, because that's the reason these things aren't allowed.
Yeah.
Is because it isn't okay to make people feel like they have to take part in this ritual for fear that they will otherwise be kind of discriminated against.
Yeah. And yes, exactly. Dropped from the team or not able to participate in something that has nothing to do with religious fervour.
Yeah. And Gorsuch claimed that this was just about someone offering a short, private, personal prayer by himself after a football game.
Wow. And they bought that?
I mean, they didn't. That was the majority opinion on the court. So, yeah.
And he's a Supreme Court judge. Why would he lie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he's lying.
Yeah.
We know he's lying.
Yeah.
Certainly Sonia Sotomayor, who wrote the dissent, knew he was lying, because she published the three pictures of the short private personal prayer where the coach was surrounded by players in the middle of the field. And said that this was what actually happened. It started out apparently as a short private personal prayer. Yep. Some players joined in, and then it got bigger and bigger, and then reporters started reporting on it. He went on Good Morning America and was talking about it after the school had said, "Look, this needs to not be a thing.
Yeah.
You can't do this legally."
Yeah.
And so he kind of agreed supposedly to stop doing it so ostentatiously, and then went on national TV and talked about doing it, and again his lawyer sent a letter to the school to say that he was going to start doing it again.
So rather than stopping doing something that he's not legally able to do, he got the law changed.
Ultimately, yeah.
Yeah. So which is what Boris tried to do with one of his ministers that was caught doing something or other and had to be dropped from office. So he sought to, Owen Paterson it was, and Boris sought to change the rules so it wouldn't apply to him, so he wouldn't have to resign from office. And the rest of the world, the rest of the government kind of went, well, wait a minute, you can't do that. That's no. And so he also tried to change the rules about having to resign if you are found to have breached the ministerial code. So there is although we don't have a written constitution, our politicians have to abide by an agreed code, which means that you can't do certain behaviours and you've got to behave in a certain with integrity and humility, and there are kind of 7 principles by which you're supposed to govern and be a politician. If you're found to have been in breach of those, one of them is found to be lying to the Parliament. If you're found, then you're expected to resign. So Boris was being investigated to see whether he had lied to Parliament. He had, by the way, spoiler alert, he had. And so he changed the rules so that you didn't have to resign if you were found out, because the Prime Minister is in charge of the ministerial code. So if you're in charge of this stuff, you just change it. Go, oh, it doesn't apply to me. It's like Trump pardoning himself. That's so that's what this guy's going. Well, okay, I'm not allowed to do this because what I'm doing is coercing people to take part in something that they don't want to take part in for fear of not being selected for the team. That's kind of illegal, to coerce people into something they don't want. Because of religious freedom, you are free to not take part in religious
Well, not
stuff.
only that, but as a teacher in a public school, he is an agent of the government essentially, and the government is not allowed to get entangled with religion in that way. So the one thing that is an interesting kind of possible saving grace in this case, which if the Supreme Court cared about precedent would be important, but ultimately probably isn't, is the fact that because Gorsuch lied so dramatically about this, he has essentially claimed that this case is about someone engaging in a personal, private, quiet prayer by themselves, and that's allowed. That's already allowed.
Yeah.
You can do that whenever you want.
Yeah.
It's the public stuff that involves other people that you're not allowed to do as a public school teacher. So essentially what Gorsuch has claimed this guy did and then said, yeah, that's fine, was already allowed under the law. So arguably he hasn't changed the law, because the stuff that the guy really did is the stuff that is illegal.
Right.
The stuff that Gorsuch says in his opinion the guy did was already legal.
So they've ruled on the fact that what's already legal, they made it more legal.
If you go by that, he hasn't really changed very much. If another case came up, which was clearly about a public school teacher leading his class in prayer, like on a daily basis, and making it a thing about his homeroom activities or whatever, that would not fit under this precedent. That would not be. He couldn't claim that it's a personal, private, quiet, private prayer.
Yeah.
So this case wouldn't help him, even though essentially they're the same thing.
So the guy who is basically bellyaching because he didn't get his contract renewed because what he did, he'd been asked not to, isn't actually helped by this ruling.
Oh, I mean, to be honest, I don't know what the outcome is for Kennedy. I don't know. I mean, he doesn't get his job back because they can't compel the school to employ him. I don't think that would be. I mean, it would be insane. Doesn't mean it's definitely not happening. But...
I noticed you hesitated there. But the Supreme Court talking about that would just be insane. Oh no, they might. Doesn't actually stop them. Kind of.
So that's Jesus.
That's Jesus.
Moving on to guns. Is the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, and this is a case where I believe Clarence Thomas wrote the majority opinion on this one,
right? And
the law in New York and in various other liberal states, California being one, was that in order to concealed carry in New York, in order to have a gun on your person, you had to have a reason.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. Call me insane, but that seems reasonable.
The point was you had to actually make a case,
right,
in order to get a license to concealed carry in New York. It wasn't just assumed that the right is that it is a right for everyone.
Yeah,
because the Second Amendment says that the government shall not infringe the rights of a well-regulated militia to keep and bear arms. People always forget the well-regulated militia part when they're talking about how they have the right to basically any weapon they want. But that doesn't mean you get to carry them around with you everywhere.
Yeah.
And DC versus Heller essentially argued that not only should a militia be allowed to have them, that also applies to self-defense in the home. And so you should be allowed to have guns in your house.
Right.
That's just a thing you should get.
Right.
This goes, but also in public.
Right. Right.
And the states shouldn't just be allowed to make that rule that you have to have a reason. The assumption should be that anyone's allowed to carry guns all over the place
like
for no good reason.
So there's no militia. It's not well regulated. So in fact, what that is taking away any kind of regulation, well regulated or other.
Yeah, I mean that's been for a while.
Yeah,
I saw it was a tweet, I think. Was it after Uvalde? Someone saying a well-regulated militia went into this elementary school and shot children.
Yeah.
If you don't think that was a well-regulated militia, you already know what's wrong with the Second Amendment.
Exactly. Yeah.
So essentially this has made it harder for states to prevent people from just taking guns everywhere. But not impossible by any means, because there's lots of states that had more objective tests for who is allowed to have licenses to carry. And this, my understanding of this was based on the fact that the test in New York and a few other states, but this was specific to New York, was subjective, essentially, that you had to have a good reason and a person got to decide whether your reason was good enough.
Good or not. Yeah.
And so the Supreme Court case essentially made it that the assumption should be that everyone has the right, no matter. So New York have already made a new law. Kathy Hochul has signed into law a rule that you can carry guns all over the place, wherever you want, except certain sensitive locations, where if you have a gun in those locations, that's a felony.
Right.
And they've made those locations quite a lot of New York.
Right. Right. Nice.
So sensitive places where you can't have a gun in New York. The subway, trains, buses, ferries, government buildings, houses of worship, schools, libraries, public playgrounds, public parks, zoos, homeless shelters, and polling places. And also, just for fun, Times Square.
Nice. Yeah, that's most of New York, really.
Yeah, that's a significant.
Apart from,
it would be hard to get from one place to another in New York without going through at least one of those places.
Yeah, yeah. So even if your intent was to go into Macy's, where it seems to be okay to carry a gun,
you can carry a gun in Macy's.
You've got to cross Times Square to get there, or you've got to go on the subway, or
or through a park,
yeah. Wow.
So that's one way of dealing with it. Yeah. And they seem to have successfully, for now at least, put that in place.
Well,
it's a huge radical change in how gun laws can be made.
Yeah.
But it seems there are things that states can do about it to mitigate the biggest problems with it.
The ultimate, and we know the right doesn't do irony, is that the assumption is you have the right to carry a gun anywhere, but there is no assumption that you have the right to decide what to do with your own body if you're a woman.
Oh, yeah.
That's
not only that, but states can't tell you what to do with your gun.
Yeah, but they can tell you.
But only states can tell you what to do with your body.
Wow.
Yeah. The federal government can't do that, and individuals can't decide.
The state can. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
We're not for big government.
Oh, yeah.
But we will decide what you can do with your body at a state level. Yes.
In the spirit of states being creative about dealing with these kinds of laws, the law in Maine that I mentioned about public schools having to get private religious schools having to get public money, or it's not religious freedom. I heard that Maine have changed their rules so they're not discriminating against religious schools. They have said that they will only give their public money to schools that do not discriminate against LGBT people in terms of being allowed to go to their school or being employees, which is essentially exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
But does it in a way where they're saying, no, we're just being equality positive.
Yeah.
We are, anti-discrimination. That's what we're doing. It's nothing to do with religion.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's very good. Well, and I've just opened a bottle of Shipyard American IPA from Portland, Maine.
Oh, there you go.
As you mentioned that. Well, there you go. I'll drink to Maine. Fantastic.
Yeah. So there are other Supreme Court cases where they've tried to fuck society in the last couple of weeks, but we'll have to leave those for another episode because it just takes too long to.
And they might do another couple.
I think their term's over. Actually, I think all of the. I think all of the opinions have come out now.
Right.
So I think we'll have to wait. They did, which again we'll talk about another time. They have already talked about a case they'll probably be taking on in the next session, which is going to be an issue about states being able to run elections and things like that.
Yes, another
which could have an impact.
Another Republican concern. Yeah.
So we'll talk about other stuff another time.
So yeah.
But next episode there'll be more public hearings to talk about. So
yeah,
bit of a break
back to the cheery stuff. Yeah. So finally, some things we really don't have time to talk about.
If, like most of us, you were under the impression that Senate Majority Leader and pantomime turtle Addison Mitchell McConnell III had his finger on the pulse of the common man, get ready for a shock. Mitch has an explanation, you see, for the phenomenon those in power call a robust job market and those in opposition call a labour shortage crisis. Old Yertle reckons that the reason companies who pay minimum wage are having trouble finding staff at the moment is because Americans are just too damn rich, thanks to the coronavirus stimulus checks they got last year when record numbers of them suddenly found themselves out of work. Master Oogway is convinced that the $3,200 Americans received between April 2020 and March 2021 not only kept them going through the pandemic, but is burning such a hole in their savings accounts that they just don't need to go back to work yet. Gamera's brilliant theory is that businesses who are hurting for staff shouldn't consider whether to pay a livable wage, offer meaningful benefits or prospects for advancement. All they need to do is wait for those wastrels to run out of cash, then they'll come crawling back. The reality, of course, is that Republicans just don't seem to understand the invisible hand of the market they stand so fucking hard. It's a job seekers market right now, and with jobs available at so many different levels, people don't have to accept the conditions they did before. In fact, millions of people a month are voluntarily resigning from their jobs and quickly finding new, better paid ones, and the unemployment level is lower than it was in late 2019. Thanks, Biden.
Here you go. The fabulous TV series where a group of earnest hometown occupants battles monsters to the tune of running up that Capitol Hill continues, with the Fulton County Court subpoenaing Lindsey Graham and Rudy Giuliani in connection with the 2020 election. It's this season's new thing to be calling in Trump's inner circle about the attempts to overthrow the results. Graham's starring role questioned Secretary Raffensperger and his staff about re-examining certain absentee ballots cast in Georgia in order to explore the possibility of a more favourable outcome for former President Donald Trump. And Giuliani's comic cameo made additional statements both to the public and in subsequent legislative hearings, claiming widespread voter fraud in Georgia during the November 2020 election by re-upping the same previously debunked evidence, according to court filings. The subpoenas also cover the supporting cast of Trump's other former legal advisers, including Jackie Pick Deason and the usual suspects John Eastman, Jenna Ellis, Cleta Mitchell and Kenneth Cheeseborough, to explain their solicitation of election fraud, making false statements, conspiracy, racketeering and threats related to election administration. Whilst packed with these goodies, the special grand jury can only collect evidence and issue a report on whether Trump or any of his allies should face charges. However, Season 5 of Even Stranger Things could pursue actual indictment from a regularly seated grand jury in Fulton County. Can't wait.
White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony in front of the January 6th committee last month made a few waves and drew some unusual responses from Trump world. From supposed Trump allies claiming he's way too fat to have been able to reach into the front and grab the steering wheel, to the brilliant legal mind of Rudolph Giuliani, who demolished Cassidy's claim that he asked for a pardon by tweeting, "Contrary to her false testimony, she was never present when I asked for a pardon." It was also revealed this week the two extremely witness-tampery messages disclosed at the end of the 6th public hearing were directed at Hutchinson herself, and one came from a Mark Meadows associate and referred to him by name, saying, "Meadows let me know you have your deposition tomorrow. He wants me to let you know he's thinking about you. He knows you're loyal, and you're going to do the right thing when you go in for your deposition." Which, if you ask me, sounds a bit illegal. The next public hearing will be on Tuesday, July 12th, and it seems likely it will feature testimony from White House counsel Pat Cipollone, who has agreed to a transcribed and videotaped deposition in the wake of Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony. Cipollone was with Trump on January 6th and is expected to be quite cooperative.
Oh, it's so exciting, isn't it? In an echo of Trump's lie about Hillary and the Second Amendment from our opening titles, Arizona Congresswoman Debbie Lesko is convinced that because of H.R. 2377, Federal Extreme Risk Protection Order Act of 2022, they want to take away the rights of law-abiding citizens to protect their own children and grandchildren and wives and brothers and sisters. This bill takes away due process from law-abiding citizens. She is sufficiently incensed by it and sufficiently twisted in a Moebius loop kind of QAnon way that she went on to illustrate her fervour by saying, "I have 5 grandchildren. I would do anything to protect my 5 grandchildren, including, as a last resort, shooting them if I had to protect the lives of my grandchildren." Democrat bills that we've heard this week want to take away my right to protect my grandchildren. Okay, Will you tell her, or do I have to? How does maintaining the right to kill your 5 grandchildren with, I assume, a 6-shooter, protect them? I would shoot them to protect them from having my firearms taken away from me. What the actual fuck? And she said it out loud right on the floor of the house, where things like that are streamed to the interwebs, like verbatim. And naturally, people commented on the sheer insanity of it. Of course, Lesko then took to the same interwebs to say, "It never ceases to amaze me the lengths gun control zealots will go. They turned my speech about protecting Second Amendment rights and my right to protect my grandchildren from violent criminals into a claim that I would harm my own grandchildren. Absolutely ridiculous. Yes, you goddamn are, Debbie." I wonder what her children, the parents of her grandchildren, have to say about that oft-experienced problem of your parents thinking they know better about how to take care of your own children. Yeah, kids, we're not going to be able to go see Grandma for a while.
If you saw Missouri GOP Senate candidate Eric Greitens' ad last month in which he posed with a rifle and said he was going rhino hunting, you may have thought you'd seen the craziest, most violence-inciting ad of the year, but this is the 2022 GOP, so I doubt it'll even make the top 10. The latest comes from Arizona congressional candidate Jerome Davison, who is black, by the way, a fact that will become relevant very soon. In his ad, he mocks Democrats who claim nobody needs high-capacity magazines over slow-motion footage of people in KKK uniforms charging towards his house with pitchforks and baseball bats. He concludes that you might just need those 30 rounds, quote, when the rifle is the only thing standing between your family and a dozen angry Democrats in Klan hoods.
Whoa!
Davison displays a stunning lack of, I don't think you can even call it insight. Sight, I guess? Since he just needs to look at the incumbent he's trying to primary, avowed white supremacist Paul Gosar, to see where the threat is coming from.
Yep.
I would say it's hard to choose who we want to win, but there are 4 other candidates and none of them have been quite so publicly batshit, so maybe any one of them, please. If you're wondering what kind of campaign manager would sign off on such a fucking insane ad, meet Austin Steinbart, a man recently released from prison after serving 8 months for hacking celebrities' medical records. Steinbart claims he's a time traveller from the future and a deep-cover operative for the Defence Intelligence Agency. He also claims he's Q. But Vice have described his ideas as, quote, too out there for the vast majority of QAnon followers who have dismissed him as a kook.
Wow.
So many of Paul Gosar's followers, QAnon believers, who think Trump was sent by God to defeat a satanic cabal of child-eating movie stars while they wait for JFK to come back from the dead and send Hillary to Gitmo, think this guy is a kook.
Not an endorsement, really. Michigan GOPers introduce ban on non-existent school drag shows that they admit don't exist, is the actual headline from TalkingPointsMemo.com. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, who's a Democrat, accused Republicans of manufacturing fake issues, having joked as the first gay person in Michigan to be elected to statewide office about a drag queen in every school. True to form, the Republicans didn't see anything to laugh about and unveiled a bill that would ban K-12 public schools from doing anything that would expose students to a drag show or drag presentation, whilst admittedly none of the 5 bill sponsors could actually think of a time when schools put on drag shows. GOP Michigan gubernatorial candidate Tudor Dixon declared she said she was joking. But we take this as a trial balloon. We're here to fight that culture war. And Michigan State House Representative Bo Lefebvre, yes, also Republican, argued, I don't think that we need to have a problem occur in the state of Michigan before we address it. Yeah, of course not. After all, none of the other things your party gets heated about ever fucking existed. Let's face it, Trump's entire presidency was a joke looking for a solution. Oh, yeah, the 2020 election, which you didn't like. I suppose because it worked.
I'm shocked that the Michiganders called Tudor and Bo are Republicans.
Yeah, yeah. It's brilliant, isn't it? It's so good. So good. And they're going, yeah, we're going to make up something and then fight a culture war. Sure we are. Of course we are. Yeah, we can take a joke. Well, yeah, you vote your one in.
The press has finally figured out what I've been saying for a while now, that Trump will probably announce his 2024 presidential run soon so that he can claim all the legal cases against him are just political harassment. To be fair, I've been saying it for a while and I've been wrong so far, and I'm pretty fucking shocked it hasn't happened yet. I mean, it's not like the legal cases have been going badly. Meanwhile, the press, in this case The Guardian, have pretty reasonably waited until they had something to report rather than just saying what they reckon like some podcaster. It's not much yet, but apparently Trump has told advisers that he thinks throwing his hat in the ring would strengthen his argument that investigations into him are politically motivated, even though some of those advisers think he should wait until after the midterms. To be honest, I wouldn't be shocked if those advisers are telling him to wait in the hope that he gets indicted for something pre-midterms and then they can stop advising him, because that must be a fucking nightmare. Meanwhile, maybe the reason Trump hasn't announced yet is because his legal advisers are people like Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, and they're telling him he's got nothing to worry about because they got their law degrees out of a cereal packet.
It'll be fine!
Or maybe he realises that if he announces, then maybe he'll run and maybe he'll win, and then he'd actually have to be president again, and he clearly hated it first time round. Of course, I'm just speculating. Maybe in a few months a major newspaper will find a source to say the same thing and then it'll be news.
In Britpole, well, it's been a bit quiet this week. Oh no, wait, we do have a new Prime Minister. Well, the Tory party is in need of a new leader. The Prime Minister, same person, has yet to leave the building. Sorry, let's backtrack a bit, but not too far. It's now Thursday when we record this. On Tuesday evening, Health Secretary Sajid Javid resigned, closely followed by Chancellor Rishi Sunak, in the wake of it transpiring that Boris knew about Deputy Chief Whip Chris Pincher's behaviour and yet promoted him to the role of Deputy Chief Whip in February. Pincher had resigned, by the way, on June 30th for getting drunk and groping other male members of the Carlton Club, and had complaints of inappropriate behaviour towards a young male member of the Tory party staff upheld by an investigation which was reported to Boris in 2019, and yet he was promoted to the role of Deputy Chief Whip, a role that oversees the ethics and behaviours of ministers. You see, the right doesn't do irony. The two cabinet members resigned because Number 10 lied about Boris knowing and even sent people out to speak to the media to tell that lie. You know, follow the usual form. I don't know. Nobody told me. People told me. I forgot the people had told me. Sorry, not sorry. Can we move on now? And in moving on Tuesday, Boris appointed a new Chancellor and a new Health Minister and a new Education Minister to replace the one he'd moved to Chancellor. What's perhaps least/most surprising is that after all the constant deluge of mistruths, lies, obfuscations, denials, abuses of power, missing billions, tax breaks for the rich, actual criminal breaches of the actual law and losses of local elections, the one straw that broke the camel's backs seems to have a whiff of homophobia about it. Wednesday morning, Michael Slimy Tove, all mimsy were the Borogroves, Gove, had a word and told Boris to go. He didn't. And later that day in PMQs, one of Boris's own party, Tim Loughton, asked, are there any circumstances in which he, Boris, should resign? In the list, which didn't contain found to be lying, partying in lockdown, being in receipt of a fine because of criminal breaches of the actual law, etc., Boris included, if there were circumstances in which I felt it was impossible for the government to go on and discharge the mandate that we've been given. And, taking him at his word, not only did 3 call for him to resign during PMQs, but by the end of Wednesday, 44 members of his government had resigned, rendering it practically unable to discharge anything. Wednesday evening, a delegation marched duly to Number 10 to tell him to go. He didn't, saying he'd fight on, and he sacked Gove for disloyalty in doing so. Only Gove, no one else out of the 8 or so. Thursday, the newly appointed Chancellor told us he was in the delegation that told Boris to go after he'd been made Chancellor, and the newly appointed Education Secretary resigned outright after about 30 hours in office. Finally, as long ago as this morning, Boris said he would stand down as leader of the Tory party, and thus the internal election process for a new leader would begin. Of course, as the architect of this shittiest premiership in 300 years of British politics, he agreed, stated, because no one asked him, to stay on as Prime Minister until the new leader is in place. After all, he's just cleaned up the vom from the lockdown parties and put in new $1,000 wallpaper in number 10. Whilst Labour are threatening to trigger a general election by calling for a vote of no confidence in the actual government to make him leave, here's Cassette Boys' new mashup, which is a translation of Boris's uncontrite, unapologetic, blame everyone else actual resignation speech.
The first Prime Minister to receive a fine ice of cheese and wine and let the bodies how high. There was no truth under Downing Street's roof, but this ain't no lie. I'm saying bye. I sacrificed the country for my own ambition, the worst this century, to hold the position.
And that's up against some stiff competition.
Thank God I am saying bye.
So that's all the bad arguments and faulty reasoning we have time for this week. You'll find the show notes at fallaciostrump.com, and if you hear Trump say something stupid and want to ask if it's a fallacy, our contact details are on the contact page.
If you think we've used fallacy ourselves, let us know. And if you've had a good time, please give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts, or simply tell one other person in person about how much they'd like our podcast. And you can support the show at patreon.com/ftrump, just like our strawman level patrons Steve Bickle, Schmutz, Mark Reiki and Amber R. Buchanan, our true Scotsman level patrons Kaz Tui, Andrew Houck, Max Beaver, and our top patron Lauren. Thank you so much for your patronage, everyone. It really is very much appreciated.
You can connect with those awesome people as well as us and other listeners in the Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/FallaciousTrump.
All music is by The Outbursts and was used with permission. So until next time on Fallacious Trump, we'll leave the last word to the Donald.
That's right. Go home to mommy. Bye. Bye.
The one straw that broke the camel's backs seemed to have had a whiff of homophobia. Seems to have a whiff.